Hello BookTube. I am once again revisiting a book that I remember from childhood. This is Where the Red Fern Grows by Wilson Rawls. This is a book that I suspect most of you, or at least most of you Americans, will remember from reading in school. Although, as always, let me know in the comments down below what your experience is. Did you read this in school? When did you read it? When did you hear about it? I don't remember the exact year I read this book. I think it was 4th grade. If it wasn't 4th grade, it was around there. 3rd or 4th or 5th grade, around there. So I remember that this book was one of the books that my teachers would recommend, and it was very popular with the boys in the class. A few of the boys had read it. They talked how much they liked it. It was one of those books that would get boys who don't usually like to read books to read books. So eventually, out of curiosity, I picked it up and I read it. Over the years, some of the scenes have stuck in my mind. Again, those of you who have read this book as kids, maybe you had similar experiences. Going to spoil some of the key scenes here, but there's a key scene in here where there's a couple bullies, a pair of brothers, older brother and a younger brother, who are bullying the main character. The older brother runs forward with an axe, trips on a tree branch, falls on the axe, and the axe goes into him and kills him. And the younger brother is traumatized, seeing his older brother killed by an axe in this way. And it's one of those things that, as I've been an adult and as I occasionally remember the books I used to read as a child, I kind of think to myself, was that real? Was that actually in a children's book? That seems a little bit intense. Now, this was an accident as it's portrayed in the book. Nobody did this on purpose. And yet in children's books, you usually expect a sense of karmic justice, right? The good characters get what they deserve. The bad characters get what they deserve. Kind of like a Roald Dahl sense of morality. And so my memory of this was that the book was kind of almost framing this as this is what the kid deserved. It's a little bit over the top, or too much for this kind of book, right? You'd expect like the bully gets his comeuppance by being publicly humiliated, or he gets a stern spanking, or he gets beat up or something like that. You don't expect him to trip on an axe and die, and his younger brother gets traumatized by seeing it. And then I also remember that happened around midway through the book, and then the book just moves on. So, as you know, if you've been watching this channel, I've been living abroad for many years, in which it was a little bit more difficult to track down books. But now that I'm back in the US, I wanted to give this book a reread and see if it was every bit as over the top as I remembered, and to see how that scene played out. It's a bit of a morbid reason to revisit a book, but there you go. So, I will talk about that scene when I get to it, but let me start from the beginning. This book was originally published in 1961. As I said at the beginning of this video, I think this is safely regarded as a modern classic in American schools. Certainly when I was a kid, all the boys were reading it. Now, that was some time ago, so, those of you who are a little bit younger, let me know, is this book still being read widely in elementary schools nowadays? Are all the boys still reading it, etc.? It starts off with a flashback. So we meet the narrator when he's middle-aged and working in an office. He encounters a dog fight in which he rescues a dog, and this causes him to reminisce about his own childhood. And once that's established, we forget about the adult narrator completely. Then by chapter 2, we are back to the narrator as a child, and we never look back to him as an adult. That framing device is promptly forgotten. Nonetheless, one of the things that struck me immediately upon reading that first chapter is how well written it is. This is an author who knows how to write well. I guess this book became a literary classic for a reason. You feel like you're in the hands of a competent writer, a competent narrator. So we go back from chapter 2 to the author's boyhood, in which he is living out in the woods with his family. Now, one of the things I had forgotten about this book is what a good portrayal it is of life living in the woods for a country boy. And I think one of the reasons this works so well is that the narrator is just recounting his life living in the woods and running along the river and hunting raccoons and all this stuff as if it were perfectly normal, like as if this was the way all children lived. And you're reading this, of course, and you're thinking, well, that's completely different to my childhood. But you get so completely put into the mindset of this character. Now, he is living in what appears to be pre-industrial times. There's no electricity, there's no cars. For most of the book, there's no guns, although we do get kind of guns near the end of it. So initially, I was thinking that this book was supposed to have taken place in the 19th century, you know, this kind of historical fiction. But then you look this up on Wikipedia, and the book is autobiographical. Well, sorry. Wikipedia says that the book is autobiographical. Now, I'm assuming what that means is it's autobiographical in the broad strokes. Not that all the stuff in the book actually happened, but that the author was drawing on his experience growing up in the Ozarks. So, like the main character of this book, the author did grow up in the Ozarks. Now, I didn't actually know what the Ozarks is, but I looked it up, and it's a mountainous region in between like Missouri and Arkansas and Kansas. This mountainous forest, which apparently is still preserved today as a natural park, and I presume was maybe even more preserved back in the 1930s. So the author grew up in this place during the 1930s, which of course is after the Industrial Revolution, but he's living this countryside existence where his family is just living without any of the modern technology in a very traditional way out in the forest. And the author is very good at evoking all the sights and smells of this. So, you know, talking about the smell of the soil, talking about how his feet were cooled, walking around the cool soil by the river in the evening. And again, the author is not presenting this as anything exotic. He's just recounting this as the way it was. So you get fully into the mindset of the character. Now, there is a section when he goes into the town, and everyone is laughing at him because he's a hillbilly. Now, even then, it wasn't obvious to me that there was a lot of technology going on in the town. There's no reference to cars or electricity or anything like that. But you do get the sense that, his way of life was completely different than the townspeople's. So it's yet another example of how a book can completely immerse you into a different way of life that is not your own, that you would never experience. Like I will never be a country boy growing up in the Ozark Mountains, but through the magic of reading, you can get some flavor of what that's like. While I'm on the subject, I should note that according to Wikipedia, the author seems to have a bit of an interesting life. Like the character in the book, he grew up in the Ozarks until his family moved, and spoiler alert, the family moves at the end of this book. But apparently in real life, the father's car broke down. The father of the author, his car broke down, so he just got a job as a gas station attendant near the place where the car broke down. The author was put into jail a couple of times in his early adulthood for breaking into places to steal food. He had a broken formal education, a scattered education, and as a result, I guess his punctuation was never really that good, but he was self-taught as an author just because of his love of reading, and he further refined his craft in prison. So yeah, some interesting details about this. You can check out the Wikipedia page of the author for yourself. But looks like it's not your traditional author bio. It looks like some interesting details there. Anyways, right at the beginning of the book, the author develops an obsession with wanting to get 2 hound dog puppies. So this is, if you didn't know already, this is a boy and his dog's story. And I mentioned I'd be spoiling some details in this book, but I trust I'm not spoiling anything when I say that the dogs die at the end, right? I mean, that's just standard of the genre. Although I'm not sure I realized that when I was in 4th grade and reading this for the first time. But certainly as an adult, you're like, oh, okay, well, of course the dogs have to die in the end. That's just the way these books work. Anyways, he really wants 2 dogs, and he's saving up to get these dogs. Now, I remember back from reading this for the first time in 4th grade, that the book was based on him and his love for the dogs, and how heartbroken he is at the end when the dogs die. I was somewhat surprised upon rereading it to notice that certainly in the beginning, he does not desire these dogs for companionship or because he loves dogs or something like that. He wants the dogs for a utilitarian purpose. He wants them as hunting dogs. And it's not the dogs per se that he's obsessed with, but hunting. His parents are too poor to get him the hound dogs, so they get him some traps so he can go around and trap raccoons around the forest, thinking that maybe this will satisfy him, and it does for a while, but eventually he really wants those dogs. There's a whole thing about how he saves up the money for the dogs, but then when he finally gets the dogs, then his next obsession is just to teach them to hunt. And then he gets really upset when the dogs aren't learning how to hunt the right way or not learning to hunt quick enough. So it was interesting rereading this to see that the companionship with the dogs, or the love of the dogs, was not really the main theme at the beginning of this. Although certainly I think by the end of it, he has established a bond with the dogs. The boy's obsession with needing to get dogs to hunt strikes me as a bit strange at the beginning. I think it probably I imagine it strikes a lot of other readers as a bit strange. He's just so obsessed with wanting to get these hunting dogs. And again, it's not for companionship, it's just because he really wants to hunt. And you think, well, where does this strange fixation come from? The way I rationalized it to myself was reminding myself that children get fixated on all sorts of crazy things. I mean, I remember when I was a kid getting fixated on various toys I wanted, which my parents either wouldn't buy me or thought were too expensive. And, as a kid, you think, oh, if I could only get this, then my life would be perfect and everything would be fun from here on out. And so maybe that childish fixation on just whatever it is that you really want to get is part of it. The other thing, I'm not a hunter myself, so I've never really seen the attraction of hunting, but I guess the other thing I reminded myself of is he is living out in the forest without any electricity, and without really anything else to do other than his chores, as it seems to be in this book. So the excitement or the distraction of having something to do to hunt, I guess is, like nowadays he'd be obsessed about video games or something like that. But this is just what there was to get invested in at the time. So the obsession he has with hunting and going coon hunting and getting his dogs to hunt it as soon as they're ready was a little bit strange, but I talked myself past it, rationalized it to myself eventually. Then once he gets the dogs and he gets them out hunting, the style of the book or the narrative is a little bit episodic. It's narrating the nightly adventures he and his dogs have hunting. They have a few interesting encounters with the raccoons, a few close calls. It is, I think, the type of book that would not be written nowadays because sensitivities have changed. I imagine. I don't know. Let me know what you think. I mean, for one thing, if you're at all a nature lover, it's hard not to read this book and think, oh, those poor raccoons. The book is so much on the side of the dogs, and it personifies the dogs. But the raccoons, which are also portrayed as being really intelligent animals, able to do all sorts of clever things to disguise their scent from the dogs or to try and evade the dogs, they just exist to get torn apart by the dogs. So you got to feel a little bit for the raccoons. There's also a passage fairly early on where a raccoon is hiding in this huge big tree. And this is described as a really big tree that the author has recognized from childhood as a big landmark of the area. And it's initially he thinks it's too big to cut down, but because his dogs are so fixated on the raccoon, he spends several days cutting this tree down. And you think, okay, well, that's the sort of scene that might play differently nowadays. I'm thinking of movies like Avatar, where the really big tree in the forest is presented as a symbol of natural beauty, and where when the really big tree falls down, it's seen as something horrific that these terrible bad guys do. Now, to be fair, he does express some regret, or maybe not regret, some melancholy over having knocked this huge tree down that he remembered from his childhood, but not a lot of regret. It was something that had to be done in his estimation. So those kind of scenes, I think, would be written differently nowadays, I imagine. But yeah, then the scene that I remembered very clearly from childhood, the kid falling on the axe. So, yeah, this scene is pretty much just as strange, bizarre, and horrific as I remembered it, if not more so. A couple things maybe to set in place here. First of all, I mentioned before how children's books tended to have some sort of a karmic justice sense about them. You normally expected characters to get what they deserved. This book, I had kind of forgotten this, but this book is really leaning heavily into the divine intervention aspect of it. So there are several points in this book where the character asks for God's help, and then suddenly something unexpected will happen, a strong wind will happen, or something will fortuitously appear, which seems to indicate that God is answering the boy's prayers. It's left a little bit ambiguous about whether this is coincidence or whether this is God, but happens often enough that there's definitely a theme going on. So maybe by the end of the book, it's not so ambiguous at all. This is definitely God moving in here. So when that bully character is running with the axe, and this it's described as this stick all of a sudden just kind of springing out of nowhere and tripping the bully, so he lands on the axe and splits his stomach open. That is clearly meant to be interpreted as divine interference. So God is causing this boy to fall on his axe. The other thing I noticed rereading this book and knowing that scene was coming with the boy falling on his axe is how often characters are running around with axes. Sorry, when I say character, I just mean mainly the main character. He's constantly running around with axe. I guess axe was part of his hunting toolkit in case the raccoons got up in a tree. And by the way, there's this whole culture of raccoon hunting, or that is, I guess, part of the culture of the Ozarks. And like I said, this book kind of gets you into that whole mindset, that whole culture. But anyways, there's foreshadowing that his mother is worried about him slipping on the axe. At one point on an icy day, he covers the axe with a leather pouch to appease his mother. And so when you're rereading this and you're knowing that death by axe is coming, you think, okay, maybe this is a little bit foreshadowing, all this running around with axes. But yeah, anyways, the bully is running. The stick comes out of nowhere. He falls over it, lands on his axe. His younger brother is just traumatized by it, as I had remembered from my previous reading of this. Something I didn't really remember, and apologies, I guess I'm going to go into all the horrific nightmare-fueled details of this scene, but I want to make my point. Take this as your warning. The main character goes over to the bully who's lying still, and the bully is just whispering, take it out, please. And you can see that the bully has been trying to remove the axe. So the main character is able to take it out. There's a scene where the bully tries to get to his feet and his eyes open wide. He's staring at the main character and his mouth opens as if he wants to say something to the main character, but then blood just comes out of his mouth. And I thought as I was rereading this, wow, this is even more intense than I remembered it. They're not toning this down for kids at all. This is a horrific description here of this, and the character is portrayed as a bully with no redeeming qualities, and the way that bullies are often portrayed in children's books. They're just pure antagonism. Still. Now, to be fair, I remember as a kid that happening and then the book just moving on. And it's just kind of like, well, and then the bully got his just desserts, moving on with the story. But to be fair, something I did notice upon rereading this is that it is something that did stick with the narrator, with the main character. And he will frequently reflect on it as the story goes on. So it's something where there is at least some attempt to give the emotional weight to this horrific moment throughout the rest of the book. And yeah, it's a scene that didn't have to be there. You could take that scene out of the book and then maybe remove the passages later in the book when the main character is reflecting back on it. And I don't think it would affect the plot really all that much, if at all. Like I said, the plot is kind of episodic. So there's that. We then move on to other episodes. The grandfather enters the hounds into a raccoon hunting contest, which is held in the Ozarks. And that contest and the whole campground and the atmosphere around it is described in this book. And again, it's another way in which the book can act as a window into this culture, which I'm not sure it still exists. But if it did exist, it's being described as something that happened close to 100 years ago in a different region of the country than I'm familiar with. And it's just, I don't know, another example of the magic of reading, kind of getting into these, being able to see these cultures from the inside out. All the people assembled for this raccoon hunting contest. Now, if I have a criticism to make of this book, or maybe another criticism, it's that the dogs that belong to this boy are portrayed as being very special, almost a little bit too special. You're kind of like, oh, come on. I mean, what are the odds that this boy who ordered these two dogs through the mail would get these two dogs that are that much more special than all the other hound dogs in the area, and everyone says, oh, aren't those great dogs, and you've got the best dogs, and these dogs are the smartest, and these dogs are constantly amazing everyone. It's kind of like like the chosen one syndrome, or the chosen one trope, only with dogs. So instead of being with young wizards, it's the chosen one trope on dogs. On the other hand, maybe you expect that from these types of books. But anyways, because his dogs are so special and so much greater than anyone else's dogs, he wins the contest, he gets the trophy and the money. And then, as long as I'm spoiling everything, I might as well spoil the end. They encounter a mountain lion at the end of the book. Now again, because I knew this was coming, I was able to recognize that there was some foreshadowing of this in the early parts of the book. When he first got the dogs, and he was first bringing them back from the town, there was a mountain lion roaring somewhere in the mountains. Now at the end of the book, we encounter another mountain lion. Is it the same mountain lion from the beginning of the book? I guess that's left a little bit ambiguous. But yeah, the dogs fight them. One of the dogs succumbs to his injuries after the fight, and the other dog just loses her will to live because the first dog died. There is, a few things to say about this, and I'm almost out of time because my camera has a 30-minute time limit. One thing is it's very sad. You expect it, but it's still very sad. And it's being milked for all the pathos that it's worth, talking about how sad it all is, how everyone feels bad. And, reading it, you can't help but get a little bit of a lump in your throat. The other thing is, once again, this book is toying with the idea of divine intervention. Like, why did God let this happen? It turns out there is actually a reason. The parents were planning a move from this very soon. The family was about to get split apart. So the mother and the father theorized that God let the dogs die so that the family didn't have to get torn apart. Again, this is a book that takes a very active idea of how God interferes in people's personal lives, which is a theological issue we could discuss maybe another day. but I'm out of time for this video. Thank you very much, BookTube.